think we are live right now. Let me just have a check. I think the live is working fine. Just confirming once. Yes. So let me open the chat in front of me so that it can be helpful. Yeah, I think it's working well and fine now. Okay. One more minute for the confirmation part. Hello. Hello. Yeah. It's working absolutely fine. Just if I can have one photo from here. So yeah. So hello everyone. Welcome back to the stream. And finally, we are doing the West Asia coverage after such a long time. Things have been problematic in this particular area since long, and I think it's a day 12 for the issue. So before I start further, small disclaimer. Just let me confirm the chat's working fine. Before I start further. So small disclaimer. I'm not a geopolitical expert. I'm just someone who loves to talk about geopolitics. So, without any further delay, let's get started. And I think if I can directly take you towards the map, it would be good enough. Snap's not putting here. Okay, I think the map's fine, well and loaded. So before I start, a couple of, I would say, basic terminologies which needs to be discussed because this is this particular issue when it comes to the case of geography. The terms that we hear often in the Middle East issue is the term Middle East, West Asia, Gulf nations, and then comes the case of Arab states. So a bit of a context around that, if I may. So Middle East as such has no significance when it comes to the geographical and even the literal sense because this is a globe. It's not any map or a flat thing on which you can mark that this particular area is a middle area. So the concept of Middle East as a particular topic comes based upon the map which is generally used, which is a Europe-centric map. So with the Eurocentric map, this is how the world kind of looks like. And in the east, then we have this area of Asia, and in the west we have the USA and other European countries. Still, if I take into account this Eurocentric thing, the east part gets much, I would say, accommodated, but the middle part, I don't know how this terminology came that it's the middle east. So that's what's the case for Middle East. It's a geographical misnomer and shows the, I would say, hegemonic use of Eurocentric maps. So that's first of all the case for Middle East as a terminology in itself. Then comes West Asia, what it should actually be called. So this is how the case of Asia looks like. Here's our India. It's accommodated in the South Asia part. Southeast Asia, then comes this particular area of ASEAN countries. East Asia comes China part and Japan and other parts. And West Asia is particular this region mainly, where the issue has been going about and what we hear when the term Middle East comes about. That's the case for the West Asia, which includes the countries like Israel, Saudi, Iran, and etc. That's the case for West Asia. That's how the term should be used. But unfortunately, the Eurocentric agenda gets talked a lot when we discuss this particular area. Coming to the Gulf nations, so Gulf nations is basically equated to the Gulf Cooperation Council, which consists of a few countries. If you have to remember, its acronym is US में beef क्यों okay है. So this is taken from Mr. Shivan sir's channel UPSC. So thanks to him for that. So this basically includes the countries of UAE, Saudi, then comes B for Bahrain, Q is Qatar, O is for Oman, and K is for Kuwait. So this particular region is the region when it comes to the case of the Gulf countries: Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Oman, and I think Qatar was also there. So yeah, that's the case for the Gulf nations. When we hear the term the Gulf nations, this is what the term Gulf nations mean. Coming to the Arab states now. Arab states is a further broader term which includes the countries like Palestine, Jordan also somewhere or the other comes up here itself. We have then Iraq here. We have Syria here. I think even Lebanon comes here. I have to confirm. But Egypt comes here. Morocco also comes here. Sudan comes here. And also finally Libya. Just if I can confirm quickly, the Arab states. So yeah, it's mainly these particular countries of Egypt, Iraq, Algeria, UAE, and the other encompassing countries. So yeah, when we hear the term Arab states, that's what we refer to basically this particular region, and then extending all the way towards the case of African North Africa part and a bit of the West Africa. That's how the initial terminology looks like. Now coming to the agenda, the topic of the video, the West Asia turmoil. So on 1st March, as we know, how the things have been evolving about. Iran got bombed by USA and Israeli forces combined, and the supreme leader was assassinated in that particular incident, and the war has been raging post that. How they were able to track the movements of Ayatollah Khamenei and his other bodyguards. So Israel had taken help of something called a social uh, relations hypothesis. Not to go much fancy algorithmic term. So it's for the term thrown when it came to the case of how Israel and the CAA were able to track the movement of the supreme leader and its bodyguards, track leaders, bodyguard movements. And that's how the bombing started, and the leader was assassinated. So to give a bit of a context on the way now the things have evolved and how it looks for India as a broader region, and in general also for the case of this world, I think we have to go a bit towards the past on how this particular issue has evolved. It includes Iran's history, I would say, and Israel's formation to as a particular entity. So coming to a quick look for the case of Israel first of all. So the Israelis basically are from the Jewish community, which was mainly prevalent in this particular holy area of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is often associated with the three Abrahamic religion. It includes Jewish, it includes Christianity, and it even includes Islam. So it's a confluence of three major religions of the entire world, which are comes about. Coming to the case then for how the persecution of Jews happened, and then the formation of Israel as an independent entity. So to give you a bit of a context, I had initially wrote article on Medium with the same context on how Israel's formation came about and the way things have been evolving post that. So that's how the case of the tragic irony of history comes, and that's first of all which I would like to discuss here. So when the agenda regarding the case of Israel comes about, what we often see is the element of Jews versus the Palestinians, and often generalization which we tend to create is that this is something to do with religion. Palestine, we think it's equal to religion, but if you try to trace back to the entire history, things are much, I would say, diverse and different as compared to the way the element of religion has been brought about. So the first ever prosecution when it comes to the case of Israelis happened way back in the 586 BCE. This was called the Babylonian exile era, where the new Babylonian Empire came about and the Jews were persecuted initially. So, if I have to include the case of persecution, so the first ever recorded persecution happened by the Neo Babylonian Empire in the 586 BCE, and that's the first ever recorded persecution of Jews happening about. And then the major, which came, was by the Romans. So this was happened somewhere around the 70 CE, and also somewhere around the case of 132 CE when the Bar Kokhaba Bar Kokhaba revolt took place. So the thing when it comes to the case of Romans, Roman Empire, everyone knows history. Roman Empire, case of Europe, conquering parts of West Africa, North Africa, and even majority of the portion in the Persian area. That's where the Romans had been expanding a lot. And when they came in contact with Jews, so thing with the Romans was there was no element of Christianity involved here, which is often a hypothesis and often a misconception which people had. The Romans were basically like a tribal people. And when the tribals start to attack a particular region, they go berserk. They would go and attack everyone and anything which comes in the side. That's where the initial persecution of the Jews started to take place under the dominion of Romans. So that's the first ever recorded large mass scale execution and persecution of Jews happening from the country of erstwhile this area of Jerusalem, and they had to move towards the case of the Europe. But Jews have been unfortunate, I would say, unfortunate in the past. They have been often blamed for the death of Jesus Christ and also the famines or any regional kingdom issue when took place. They were the initial ones to be blamed because these Jews, being smart enough people, they were part of the treasuries, and often whenever the blame on a crop loss or a money loss used to came about, the first persons to be blamed were the Jews. That's how the element, I would say, the case of Jewish persecution used to happen. They were expelled from the countries like England, even France, and even Spain. It might come out to be shock to many people, but this is how the actual history looked like. And the ghettoization, which we saw under Hitler, it actually happened way back also. So somewhere around 15th, I think 1500 around something, at the time in the Venice, basically once again the Roman area. That's where initially the persecution and the ghettoization was also seen. So that's how the history when it comes to the case of Israelis have happened. But post that, the 19th century came about, and then the early 20th century came about. Like I mentioned, Jews being smart enough people, having accumulated a lot of wealth, they started a movement with the name of the Zionist movement. So the Zionist movement started, which was to have a safe home for the Jews, and the idea of going back to the land of Israel and the Jerusalem. That's how this particular idea started to build up across the communities of Jews. And a key player who saw this to their own benefit was none other than the British, the colonial king, the queen at the time. So they had signed the Balfour Declaration initially, somewhere around 1916, and then the Peel Commission in the 1930s. So, what this particular area and this particular topic wanted was that they wanted a dominance of somewhat of a hegemonic power of theirs in this particular area of Middle East, with two primary reasons: oil and the Red Sea. Suez Canal at the time had opened up. There were issues going about on whether Egypt as a country would take that particular area, and then the case of oil being discovered in this area. That's the reason why the British wanted their presence here, and so did USA later on. And then the 1930s and the 40s came. The Holocaust under the Hitler took place, and the persecution of Jews just expanded like anything. But the key question once again is coming again, that how is the topic of once again the religion coming here? So when the Holocaust happened, and finally in the 1945, the issue around bringing a safe space towards the case of Jews expanded. The 1948 UN resolution finally proposed a land in the area of Palestine, that 55% of that area would be given to a 33% population of the Jewish. If I'm correctly saying, yeah, it's correct. So it was the 1948 UN, 1947, sorry, 1947 UN partition plan, and it was 55% land of Palestine to 33% people, basically the Jewish. That's how the initial idea of Israel as a state started to came about. Now, my question once again is, the religion topic yet not has been discovered. So, going back to the case of how the Jews, the Islamist thing used to evolve pre 1947. That's where the case once again comes by. There were two ways in which the Islamic community saw Jews. One was the case of Dhimmi. So, like back in India, when the Mughals used to rule, there was the concept of paying a jizya. So, this is how initial treatment of many Jews used to take place. They were treated as second-class citizens who are being held by the Islamic community to stay. They can do their religion and follow their norms. Just they have to pay a jizya. And the second element, of course, the persecution did took place. It mainly happened around the case of North Africa in the Iberian Peninsula region. So that's the initial base when it comes to the case of Israel. And once again, the topic of religion has yet not arrived. Iran is nowhere to be seen, the biggest, I would say, rival of Israel right now. So what happened? 1948 comes by, and that's where the element which I mentioned, the tragic irony of history, started to came about. The concept which here comes is the victimization of the victims. The very own Jews which were persecuted from this particular area now started the initial persecution of Palestinians, and it's reported that 700,000 Palestinians were forced to leave their homes in 1948 when the initial purge started. And that was seen as a breach of trust by the Arab states, the Egypt primarily, then the case of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. And these particular countries saw this as a breach of trust by the British and the USA. And this culminated into the 1948 Arab-Israeli war, then the 1967 Six-Day War, and then the 1973 Yom Kippur. A key observation once again: no Iran, and like I mentioned, it was a breach of trust when it came to the case of Arab states. There was no initially the element of religion per se. What was that the Palestinians are being removed from that particular area, and the Arab states did not wanted that particular, I would say, issue to happen. So it was more of a regional and structural led imperialist history. which led to the persecution and the issue of Jews versus Palestine started to take place. So this is a bit of a context for the Israel's formation. Coming to now the case of Iran's history. So if I can get my facts straight, just a second. Name of president removed by the Shah of Iran. Shah of Iran, yeah. So when Iran's formation started to take place initially, what we saw, just a second. So yeah, so when initially Iran became, I would say, independent from the issues around British, and they were trying to build up their own countries in the 1940s era, they had a prime minister with the name of Muhammad Mossadegh, and he had somewhat, I would say, leaning towards the case of the left wing as compared to what the USA would have liked at that particular time. And to cut short the story and not to drag it much longer, and people get bored here. So what happened was a CIA-backed coup took place, and the Shah of Iran took power. And what the Shah of Iran did, he started to privatize and bring in Western influence in the country. A deeply religious state dominated with the Shia community. Iran opened up to USA. The oils were opened up. Big companies, the US came about. Women were freely allowed to have their own rights, go to the beaches, and that's where the initial case of westernization of Iran took place under the Shah of Iran. Westernization of Iran under Shah. However, this was seen, I would say, as a breach of a trust to the Shia law, and also the way USA was mingling with the affairs. And then came the 1979 Iranian revolution, and the Shah was deposed. The Ayatollah cleric regime started to build, and that's how Iran became a Shia dominated led, I would say, country. So this is the beginning part when it comes to the case of now the issues. So USA's backed Shah has been deposed against the idea of Israel's creation. It's fully supported towards the ambition of Palestine and is against the case of USA also. So it becomes a bit of a problematic issue for USA, which has huge, I would say, influence and work to carry on in the Middle East Asia. And then the 1980 issues came about, wherein initially the Iranian counterpart held hostage the US diplomats. And that's how the initial issue started to build about. And now, bringing a context to the future end, I'm going to share a particular story here, the 1988 to 88 Iran Iraq war. It might sound, I would say, a bit of a off track, but yeah, it's 1 second connected. So it would basically show, I would say, the way the US administration has always looked out towards the case of the winning party. And sorry to say, but yeah, you can't trust them. So Iraq at that time was led by Saddam Hussein, the very Saddam Hussein which was deposed by USA. So Saddam Hussein at that time saw Iran's rising power and the Shia communities rising, I would say, dominance. And Iranian revolution was not meant to be a nationalistic one, but it was meant to go beyond the region of Iran. So if I can quote the exact thing here, if I can just find the exact quote. Uh, yeah, so the Islamic Revolution, which took place in the Iran, it was more than a national project. It sought to export its revolutionary Islamic ideology across the Middle East. In general, when the revolutions or in general big movements used to take place, They were more or less, I would say, contained in the national interest only, and it usually did not become part of a broader, I would say, foreign policy. However, the Islamic revolution's agenda and the case of the Iran's prominence towards the case of Shia domination, it explicitly mentions that it was more than a national project. It sought to export its revolutionary Islamic ideology across the Middle East, and that's where Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, they were kind of fearing this particular development in Iran, because technically a king had been deposed by religious-led revolution, and they were seeing that maybe if this export of ideas started to come about, it would cause issue in their own country. So Iraq, Saddam Hussein at that time thought that it's the best time. Iran is weak right now. If we can go and attack Iran at this time, the revolution could be contained, and maybe a particular force can come in Iran, which is much, I would say, accommodative of the dictators and the kings. So Iraq starts to attack Iran, and they attacked primarily somewhere around this area of Basra. Here was the border which they shared. That's where the initial attacks started to take place. And like I mentioned, at that time, because Iran's existence came as a counter to what USA wanted. So USA supported Saddam Hussein at the time. Kuwait, the very own country which Iraq invaded later on, they also supported Iraq. Saudi Arabia, which later on went to say that Saddam Hussein is a bad guy, they also supported Iraq. That's how geopolitics looks like. Like I mentioned in the past also, this is a realist world where the countries are trying to act like an idealist. So if you're trying to act like an idealist, that's not how things are going to happen, because at the end of the day, what you need and what you want is just dominance. So Iraq starts to attack Iran at the time, and it gets the support from Saudi Arabia, it gets the support from Kuwait, it even gets support from USA, and it even gets support from Russia. At that time, even USSR also was willing to support Iraq because they had their own interests in this region of Afghanistan at the time. They were countering the uh, area, they were trying to create their own balance. That's how Iraq, Iran was started in the 1980 to 88 era. uh, Saddam Hussein being a tyrant, he had caused a lot of issue in this particular area. The Kurds, which used to live here, even their particular area was bombed. The very own weapons, the very own material which was supplied by the USA was used against the Kurds, and the majority of Kurds at that time died at the hand of Saddam Hussein. The chemical weapons which were being used first time after the World War One era. So that's how the Iran-Iraq war looked. And to give a bit of a context on how this war finally ended and why the current issue which we are seeing right now is such a perilous issue and it can lead to a big chaos. In 1988, an Iranian civilian aircraft took place from Iran, and it was going towards the foreign abroad countries. USA's particular ship, which was parked in this particular area of the Hormuz Strait, the Persian Gulf, which we are reading so much about, they mistook, as they quoted it, to be Iranian fighter jet, and they bombed that civilian aircraft. 290 people died. That's how the Iraq-Iran war ended. It ended with 290 people of Iranian civil airline dying, and a missile from USA did the job. Now the big, I would say, problem and the issue here was Ronald Reagan was at that time, and he said sorry, but the formal apology from USA administration didn't take place. The guy who gave the order for the missile to be shot, he received a gold medal. So that's how the Iran-Iraq war finally came to an end. And just keep this particular thing in mind when we further discuss the particular issues which are happening right now, because that's how I feel such a big issue can again arise. And we are seeing people are dying right now a lot. We'll discuss about that in long. One more key element, I think we can just give a foreshadow here. At that time when the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz was being stopped by the Iranians, the Kuwait-based oil tankers used to have USA's flag on them so that Iran does not bomb them. Iran avoids confrontation. So just keep this fact in mind because this is a foreshadow for the current issue. So moving on ahead, the war stopped. We know what happened with Saddam Hussein very well. That history has been, I would say, accommodated. The 9/11 crisis came about. Iraq, Saddam Hussein mentioned around the weapons of mass destruction, and then his uh, grounds on boots on ground taking place. Iraq being, I would say, completely destroyed by the U.S. Administration, and then Saddam Hussein's execution. Same happened in the case of uh, Libya too. They deposed Gaddafi, and then Libya went for a toss. So that's how the initial history of this particular region of Middle East and the Arab states look like. Now coming back to the context of the Iran issue. So the biggest mention which has been the element around the nuclear weapon. Mr. Netanyahu has been saying since 1995 that Iran is about to make a nuclear weapon in the next week. Iran is about to make a nuclear weapon in the next week. But that nuclear bomb has never arrived, first of all. And second off, if we have to go by the exact, I would say, verbatim when it comes to the case of the Iranian revolution, the Ayatollah Khomeini, the supreme leader, he had issued a fatwa which had mentioned that the nuclear program of Iran won't be used to create nuclear weapons for war. I don't know if it was just for the namesake to show the world that we are not gonna go for the element of nuclear weapon and arsenal, or was it the real deal? But that's how the Iranians have presented their stance. That we have a fatwa, and the fatwa says that the use of nuclear weapon in war will be avoided. That's the fatwa of the supreme leader, which reads. So Iran gets on getting, I would say, threats by the US administration to back down, stop their nuclear growth. Cyber attacks have taken place so many times on the Iranian nuclear sites. Key nuclear scientists of Iran has been killed a lot by Israel. Just a second. So yeah, the issue kept on going. Then came the 2014 era. That's why I say that this is a realist world. People just see their own benefits. They'll see their benefits. So technically, Iran hosts a majority of a stake when it comes to the case of oil. And natural gas, oil is something which Europe needs to cool their homes. So Germany at that time was trying to bring up a negotiation, a table of ground with the P5 countries, USA, Russia, China, uh, UK, and France, and then with the Iran, that a nuclear deal, a nuclear agreement can be signed where Iran would agree to shut down and close down or decrease the nuclear program, and as a counter, I would say, balance, the rest of the community, rest of the world would not apply sanctions on them. So that's where the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Action Plan, Jacopa, Jacopa, spelling is Jacopa, Jacopa, Joint Action Plan on, yeah, atomic energy. If the full form I can find, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So that's what was signed between P5, Germany, and your Iran. And at that time, the deal said that Iran will reduce their centrifuges, reduction of enrichment levels will take place, and in all, the issue of sanctions will be removed to give a show of display when it comes to the case of how diplomacy can be used to bring about peace. So at that time, there's a report which shows that the US administration and the Iranian administration, when they were going for diplomatic ties, they actually exchanged photos of their kids with each other. They basically talked that this is the future of the world and we are trying to bring up a peace for them. That's how I would say the agenda of bureaucracy should look like. Just a second. They basically thought that this is fine, working fine. So that's how Jacopa came. It felt a success and it was looking like the things would be fine, but Then came 2018-19 era and Mr. Trump's 1.0 era. First US presidency by Mr. Trump came by. And he removed the agreements from the Jacopa. Sanctions were reimposed, and the issue once again started to build up between USA and Iran. 2020 January, it I would say accelerated further. Top commander of Iran, forgetting his name right now. 2020, which Iran general was killed? Somewhere or the other, it was yeah, General Qasim Soleimani. So he was at that time killed, and once again the issue between USA and Iran at that time was at a peak. I just forgot one thing to mention here. It was the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. So this is a US designated terrorist organization. It's still IRGC, terrorist organization by USA. Yeah, the US formally designated Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, including its squad forces, as a foreign terrorist organization at that time only. So that's the case for the IRGC. The existence of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is mainly to ensure that the revolution lives and the power of the clergy maintains. And whenever the IRGC sees a threat happening to the sovereignty of the supreme leader, they often, I would say, go for confrontation against people. So that's an initial history for the Iran case. Building it back once again, 2024, we again had seen at that time how Iran, Israel had been going up against each other. That basically happened because of the 7th October 2023 issue. And that's something, like I mentioned earlier on also, nowhere of a defense can be given to what of a heinous crime happened on that day. On that day, innocent civilians of the Jewish community, the Israeli people, and even the people which at that time were visiting that particular music festival were killed. So nowhere in, I would say, the international dogma or the way the people perceive the case of equality secularism, that particular terrorist attack would have been defended. So what Hamas did at that day was absolutely wrong. But what happened post that, I would say it was a tragedy. There's a theory with the name of just war theory in international relations. It was given by Sir Augustus Hippo. So what he mentioned in the case of the just war theory is that you have to use a force proportionate to the amount what this real person ahead is. If I take the case of India here, when India launched Operation Sindoor against Pakistan, we targeted only the terrorist setup there. We did not target civilian bases. We did not target even the military bases of Pakistan. That's where the idea and the agenda of the just war theory comes about, that your attack should be proportionate enough to the issue which is at hand. You can't, I would say, bring up a bazooka in a hand-to-hand combat. That's what I would like to say here. So that's what I feel when the issue of the just war theory comes by. The way Israel started to bomb Gaza, the chaos which happened, Iran, like being the protectorate as it proposed itself, started to then bomb Israel, and then that's how the initial 2024 issue came about. We know how the things happened at the time. USA, the 6 day basically chaos, which 6 day chaos again, which happened between Iran and Israel at the time. USA's bomber plane came and bombed Israel. At the time, many countries mentioned this is not the right way of breaching the, I would say, sovereignty of any country's airspace. If I have to quote something here, so the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, he recently said that the international law was being respected less and less, and there was little point in lecturing allies. So that's what I feel when the agenda of realism and the way international geopolitics has been evolving has been so far. It's a big of a mess when it comes to the case of the entire world, and the innocents are just, I would say, getting, I would say, plummeted in this particular chaos. So that's the case of an initial background for this particular issue. Now let's finally start the big deal, the US Iran Israel conflict. So yeah, finally after 25 minutes or so, yeah, we are finally now into the topic. I have given a base. आगे पीछे मैं करता रहूंगा अगर मेरे को लगा. So yeah, let's start again. So first March, USA and Iran started their bombs. Precision guided missiles were used, and the supreme leader of Iran, he was killed. So that's how the initial thing started to come. Sole purpose, Iranian revolution. And when the main supreme leader, he has been killed, the IRGC went, I would say, berserk at the time. They started to bomb the Arab states, the Gulf states, the Qatar case, and the issue kept on, I would say, becoming worse and worse and worse. Bringing a bit of a context which I read in this particular ongoing war and somewhere around the case of the supreme leader of Iran also. So, firstly, for this particular issue which has been going about, as per Reuters, 1/4 of Americans only approve this war, and the US strikes. US strikes, which killed the supreme leader. I think everyone would have seen that particular video which went viral recently, where a senator was attacking a US Marine Corp. So a US Marine citizen, old person, he looked like an old person in the video. He was trying to say that this particular war is not something which the US should be part of. But the senator, in a rage of fit, in the heat of the moment, he started to tackle down that US Marine Corps person. That's how the issue has been seen in the American community itself, that the war is not being liked by much of the people. Coming to the Western powers, like I mentioned, the German Chancellor Frederick Merz. He mentioned that international law was being respected less and less. So yeah, and he went on to say that it's less and less becoming relevant to lecture allies, but he went on to say that yes, the Iranian regime was a terrorist regime. So yeah, essentially he said yes to that particular US actions. Coming to the case of the Iranian, I would say, administration once again. The Iranian administration has been infamous in the past. 2009, when elections took place for the president, at that time, huge revolution. At that time, the protests came about. It also happened in 2017, 2019, 2012. It was called the Green Revolution. Green Revolution by the Iranians to counter the excess of rule in Iran. Even in 2024, then I would say to appease and to carry functioning well. The president which finally came was Masoud Pezeshkian. Very sorry if I'm pronouncing this name wrong. And he was seen as a reformist at the time. And that's how the Iranian, I would say, history and the policy has been evolving. Now, once again, coming to this particular issue, this issue has sent shockwaves across the energy sector, the shipping sector, air travel, oil sector, and the business of the global trade in itself. So, coming back to the map here, world's near about, I would say the exact number here, 20% of world's oil moves through this particular area. We have the big giant Qatar, Iran here, which are the major, I would say, entities when it comes to the case of transporting oil exports to the rest of the world. If I take the case of India, a fifth procurement of the gas with 40%. Sorry, just a second, let me confirm. Yeah, 60% of India's energy imports happen from this particular area of Gulf and the Middle East, wherein the 50%, I would say, the crude oil finally comes, and 70% LNG. The LPG imports reach around somewhere around 80 to 85%, and that's the same case for China also, with the majority of the proportion coming from Iran itself, because Iranian oil is at this particular time on sanctions, the freezing of assets. So the only country willing to bring in that particular oil is China itself. So 20% of the world's oil is coming from this particular region, and right now things are very, I would say, bleak. Here is what the Strait of Hormuz is. It's a very narrow strait. If I have to quote the exact parameters, just a second. So yeah, coming here. Just one second. I had a particular message coming, so just a second. So yeah, coming back to the topic, if I think I might need a small pause here. I have a urgent thing happening about. I think we have initially touched the part of the war. I think the background is very much touched here, and in the next, I would say, video, background video done. I think the ramifications can be discussed. So yeah, we'll catch up very soon once again with the next part of the video. Thanks a lot for tuning in. See you very soon. So yeah, yeah. See you very soon.